Hey, folks, welcome back to the Mac and Mike Show. You know the drill. You know which one of us is the good looking, handsome Mac and which one of us is the rather plain, ordinary looking Mike. So I won't go through pointing out which is which. You'll have to fathom that for yourself. Mike and I talked about a lot of things during the past week, and we had a great topic to talk about today. Unfortunately, we both forgot what it was. That's what happens when you get old and retired and you don't. Yeah, anyways. So earlier today during lunch, we were watching a TV show, and this person come on and said that more men than ever are seeing therapists today. They didn't really give a reason for why, did they? They just made the statement that they were seeing therapists. Right?
The correlation was women found them more attractive.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm for anything that makes women think I'm more attractive. Although there's really not much I can do. You know, I sat down to get a haircut the other day and I said, make me look handsome. And the barber looks at me and said, there's only so much I can do. And, well, that was the put down from the barber. So more men are going to go see therapists today. And we watched this program and they interviewed, I mean, there were three or four people in the panel and they all talked about their therapist or their need for a therapist or if they need one or not. And after we watched the show, as Mike and I want to do, we went out in the back porch and we started shooting shit and stuff. And I looked at Mike and I said, you know, Mike, I've never been to a therapist. And I don't know that I ever would. I don't know what might make me go to a therapist. And your response, Mike, was,
Well, it depends on the tragedy level. People go to therapists for different reasons. I went to a therapist because I had a tragedy in my life where a little girl was killed. The vehicle I was driving struck her. She jumped out in front of me. And, that kind of really messes with you. I mean, I didn't suffer before that. With all the wars I was involved in, I didn't really have post-traumatic stress, at least none that I could recognize. So I never saw a therapist. I had some anxiety issues where, suddenly it had hit me. And they put me on this thing called lorazepam for a while, and I was on that. And I said, I don't want to take this anymore. It was just a small pill. The doctor even said, if you take this, it's only half a milligram or something, 0.5 milligrams. It's like putting sugar in the ocean and saying it's sweet. Well, every time I took it, I'd have to take a nap. So I started practicing mindful meditation because back in the day, I was going to college for psychology, and we had studied that kind of thing. And later, I was dating a woman that had her degree from Johns Hopkins University in psychology. And I got reintroduced to mindfulness and I started doing that again. And of course, then I didn't need the pill and I've been off of that for like 7, 8 years. But yeah, there's a time and a place, I think, for therapy. You mentioned that you're a Christian, so you take it to God. I'm a Christian. I take my problems to God too. But sometimes it's good to have a friend. A therapist doesn't have to be, therapists are hit or miss. They're not all trained the same. They're not all the personality. They don't know you, so they have some general things they teach you in college about how to get people to basically arrive at their own conclusions. They make suggestions. They don't tell you anything outright. And then you sort of have to figure it out on your own. But I don't think anything beats being a Christian and having a good Christian friend to talk to. When I went and saw a counselor, I saw a Christian counselor. So, that's me. Not everybody's a Christian. Not everybody can relate to what we're saying in that lane of being Christians. But yeah, I know I said, Mac, you suffered quite a few tragedies. I don't want to say them for you because, that's not my place. But you had equally, in my opinion, number of tragedies in your life.
I had a number of things in my life that were very unpleasant and hurt me very badly and put me mentally in a bad place. There's no doubt. Some of those things, I think, might have sent another man, and I'm not saying a better or worse, that's not what I'm saying. I believe everyone has to walk in the shoes that they have. And Each of us is made uniquely.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us have strengths or weaknesses that other people don't have. Um, in my particular tragic circumstances, I was mad at everybody and I questioned everything, including God. And eventually, it was my faith that was able to bring me out of that depth of depression. And I think, as I like to tell people now, the gift that you get when you go through that kind of depression, I mean, depression where you don't want to live anymore. Not that you want to kill yourself, because that's a different kind of, but you don't want to live. And if you died, that would be okay. And what I learned from that is that for me, my God is there for me. And he was the one that brought me out of the depths of depression. And there's a few things that some smart people talked to me about that, may have been the beginnings of getting out of that great hole of depression. But what I said to Mike, and when we were talking, is I must be a Neanderthal, because I couldn't think of something that would cause me to go share my difficulties with another human being. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't have friends that I don't talk to, that I don't say, man, this has really got me down. That happens often enough. And I'm fortunate that I have a number of friends, Mike included. But what I said to him was that, again, I have children and a sibling who go to therapists, and I don't think better or worse or ill or any. I have no feelings towards what they do. They're different people than I am. For me, I can't imagine going to a stranger and telling them my innermost thoughts, my innermost fears and concerns and worries and that kind of thing. Part of that, I guess, is when I was very young. My mom inculcated within me that if you share things with other human beings, not every human being can be trusted. And sometimes those deep, dark secrets that you share with people can be used by those people to hurt you in sometimes outrageous ways. So that has been with me since I was a child. And maybe that's baggage that my mom experienced that she foisted on me. I don't know. But I've never really had that urge or that desire to tell complete strangers things about me that I would be maybe embarrassed about if they were told in a different way, in a different place, at a different time. And what I said to him, the first thing is that I can't imagine a set of circumstances that would draw me to a therapist. And then secondarily, I said, which you've already said, Mike, is that I take my problems with private conversation and prayer to my God. And, if you're not a Christian, or whatever religion you are, if you don't have that personal relationship with your God, I can imagine how difficult many of life's problems might be to deal with yourself. But I'm at the place in my world where I have confidence that my God it has my back, and that everything will be okay. And even if I don't think it's okay, it'll work out according to His plan, according to His plan for my life, His desire for my life. And even if there are difficult things, and Lord knows there have been many difficult things in my life, I have to accept His decision with grace and with love and with as much happiness and joyfulness as I can accept, because that's what He expects of me. That's what He wants of me. And on balance, the gifts that I've been given far outweigh any of the negative. And so I'm okay. I'm okay with it. But Mike, you said that the premise of the people on TV was that women find men who go to therapists more attractive.
That's what
more
that's. It's one of those summertime articles when the news cycle's slow and they have to talk about something. So I'm not sure that it's actually the truth, or if somebody just sort of made it up. But
Well, I know from my years on this little ball they call Earth, that men will do really stupid things to attract a woman's attention. So that may be one of those things we could put in that category.
yeah, well, they like to say women like men that are vulnerable, but at the same time, they want men to be real men. And that brings me back to, like, while you said you're a Neanderthal, you and I pretty much grew up in the same generation. We're
Yep.
only 2 years and a couple months apart in age. And I think the generational thing was, yeah, we're strong, we're not weak, we don't need help, blah, blah, blah. And like I said, I don't think if I had a divorce or something like that, any of that would have driven me to a therapist. Okay, so like I said, one of the best things you can do is A, be a good friend. Be that friend that Mac was talking about that you can trust, that it won't go any further. And that's rare. That's really hard to find.
Yep.
And you can never be 100% sure. But, you know, we don't go spilling our guts to just total strangers. And that's what it's like when you go to see a therapist. But, the thing about a therapist is they don't have a dog in the hunt. They're not your friends. They're not your family. They help. What you think, at least, is you're going to get a little bit more of an objective point of view. It's not somebody that knows anything about the circumstance, so they might be a little better at helping you see things from a more objective perspective. And they usually use the Socratic method, it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Socratic method is pretty simple. You just ask a series of questions. You listen, active listening, if you want to be a therapist, and then you ask the person leading questions that help them resolve the situation themselves. Now, you do that if you're a good friend. You don't need a degree in psychology. There are people who have, I said, psychiatric illnesses come two ways. One is we're a bundle of chemicals, and some people have problems with their brain or the chemicals in their body, they're out of balance.
Chemical imbalance, yeah.
And then you have the other type, like, say, just pick one, depression. So you can have a chemical imbalance gives you depression. You can also have life circumstances that give you depression. It could be a divorce, loss of a loved one, whatever. And sometimes it could be a combination of those two. And people with those kinds of degrees are more or less trained, not 100% trained, but they can help determine if it's chemical imbalance by asking a series of Socratic questions, and then maybe refer you to somebody, at least with a PhD, that can prescribe some kind of antidepressant, dopamine uptake inhibitor, whatever. But of course, along with every drug comes a problem. Every pill has a little poison, so you got to be a little careful with that. Anyhow, in general, I think a very good friend, Christian or not, can be just as helpful in the average situation of helping you through those non-chemical related psychiatric problems. So if it's just a depression because you lost a loved one, a good friend can empathize. The Bible, again, Christians teach us to weep with those who weep, mourn with those who mourn, and rejoice with those who rejoice. That's the basic tenet behind just that general kind of therapy. It's objective, it's friendly, it's not based on a chemical imbalance in somebody's system.
Well, I remember when the TV show MASH was at its height of popularity. And, they would put these publications out that would wonder or ponder why MASH was so popular. And we talked about women finding men who go to therapists more attractive. Well, one of the stars of the MASH TV program was Alan Alda. And one of the characterizations of Alan Alda was, as a man, he was very in touch with his feelings, right? And crying was okay with Alan Alda.
Yeah.
And, women seemed to think that was great.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of, articles and conversations of the day as why Alan Alda is such a popular actor with women. And it was the sense that he was vulnerable and in touch with his feelings. Yet, the women of those days, they would look to people like Paul Newman and James Dean and Marlon Brando and the tough guys, the rebels, the guys that were, not necessarily playing by the same rules as the rest of society. So while they said out loud they wanted men like Alan Alda, they were attracted to men like Paul Newman and James Dean. And there's a dichotomy there between what they say and what they do. Am I close to,
Man, you're like hitting the spot on. And Oh God, women would hate me if I said this. Well, your favorite saying is all generalities are false, including this one.
Yes,
But let's say, we take the generality because we have generalities because there's some measure of truth in
that's
each
right.
one of them.
There's a kernel of truth, a grain of truth in every generality.
So I think women are sort of bipolar in a sense.
Well, there you have me.
Not all women, but there are women who say they want one thing and really want another, or they want a combination of the both. And you never know what they want at a particular time.
I'll never understand women as long as I live.
But I go back to active listening. That's the one thing I learned about. I've been divorced a couple times, 3 times. And I've always said to people who ask me, well, what do you do to make a successful marriage? I said, I don't know, but I can tell you what not to do. Just don't act like me.
Hey, go ahead and get married again. Why should you be happy?
no.
Seriously, after the first divorce, you didn't figure out that maybe marriage wasn't for you, Mike? I don't know.
I just didn't want to spend the rest of my life alone. But I did want to mention one thing really quick. When I talked about the physical part of things that go wrong with our bodies, I just remembered one of the reasons I probably had anxiety is I didn't know until, I guess, 7 years ago, I have a tumor on my adrenal gland. And what does our adrenal gland do? It gives you that type feeling once in a while. So maybe that was it. And I've learned through meditation to recognize when it's possibly, my adrenal gland kicking in. And I can calm down really quick through sort of mind over matter type thing. But yeah, there's a whole gamut here. But, that sort of, we had started moving in the direction of having a little bit of fun, and I brought us back to chemical seriousness because that's sort of my ballywig. But yeah, I mean, it's back to, do men want women who are seeing a therapist? Typically, I would say no. I don't know what you
I
think.
think I'd agree with you. I think that we probably prefer to have less drama in our lives, and therapists kind of indicate more drama than less, doesn't it?
Sometimes, not always, but yes. I mean, generalities again.
Yeah.
It could definitely mean that. My daughter sees a therapist, and she's one of the best put together people I know. But she attributes some of her being so well put together because she has has someone to bounce things off of that she doesn't have a personal relationship with. So she can be open and honest and get, the Socratic questions asked by somebody trained to ask the Socratic questions.
What's funny, Mike, is that my sibling is going through a very emotional set of circumstances with a divorce. And we talk frequently and regularly about, the things that he's going through, financially and emotionally and, all the different aspects of your life that are being literally turned upside down as your world looked this way, and now it looks completely different. And I will give, my sibling advice and say what I would do and what he might want to consider doing. And very often he ignores that. But he goes to a therapist, and the therapist says basically the same advice that I've already given, and then he's willing to accept it. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you said, or maybe we heard in the TV when we talked about it, someone say that the therapist doesn't know you.
Right.
And one of the things that I bring to the conversations with this sibling who's having these difficulties is that I know this person. They're younger than me. I've known them their whole life. Mm-hmm. I don't know a life that doesn't have this person in it, with all of the foibles and all of the great things that they're capable of doing. Because we're all a conglomeration of various talents, good and bad, strengths and weaknesses. But when the therapist gives that same advice that I may have given 2 days prior, all of a sudden it's gospel, And I don't understand why that is. I would think that, and maybe because I'm not trained in the ways of therapists, right? I mean, you said you go to college and take certain courses, and they give you certain tried and true methods of helping people. And obviously, I don't have any of that education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, again, it goes back to familiarity breeds contempt as well, which
that could be.
That's a variation of what happened there. It's not that there was contempt. It's that there was, the familiarity thing. That's why I said it's not. The thing you get from a therapist is they don't have a dog in the hunt. They have absolutely no reason other than their own personal bent, which you hope that they put on the side and remain objective, to say anything to you one way or the other. Even if a friend or a loved one tries to console you, well, it's because that person loves me or cares about me. They're not being objective. They love me, so they're taking my side. This would be applicable to like marriage counseling.
Right.
So, obviously, if my daughter came to me, she's having a problem with her husband, and I tried to help with the kids, her husband would always think, well, that's my daughter's dad. He's always going to take her side, or something like that. So, they feel a little bit more comfortable in a objective environment.
Do you ever hear this saying, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of those things that you can blow holes through fairly frequently, often, and usually every time, because we're all individuals.
Yeah.
And what's good for one is not necessarily good for another. It may be diametrically opposed to what
That's
they
right.
need, because their needs are completely different. So, I look at therapists the same way. And again, using that comment that was made earlier, whether by you or on TV, they don't know you. So when they're giving you advice, it's kind of like that antiseptic kind of, this is what the book tells me, but
Yeah.
the book doesn't know me or you either, right? I mean, the book doesn't know the patient, and there may be things. What I learned a long time ago, when I went into management training for a very large company, they tried to tell us that we have to be careful when managing people, leadership, leading people, because people are comfortable with people that are just like them.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is that therapists who have had a certain track record of success using a certain set of tools may be confident. It's like that, familiarity breeds contempt.
Mm-hmm.
They're comfortable leading everyone down that same pathway because it's worked for them before with other people. And again, I think one of the most important and critical ingredients of helping somebody through a difficult problem is understanding their personality, understanding who they are, and understanding what they're willing to do or willing to accept, and more importantly, not willing to do or not willing to accept. Advice you might give one person would be exactly the wrong advice to give to a different person with a different attitude, a different perspective.
Yeah, that's why a lot of therapists are trained to ask questions rather than give direction. They'll say things like instead of saying like a friend might say, "Well, don't you think you oughta?" The therapist might say, "Well, could it be this approach that might help in a situation?" It's just couching the words in a slightly different way. So, yeah, it's a confusing world, and there are a bazillion reasons to see a therapist again. I mean, you think of the complexity. We sit here in America and we think we have problems. And you look at what's going on overseas, you think,
Yeah.
how do these people get through it without seeing therapists? They don't even have therapists,
Right. Yeah.
So, therapy is part of our luxury environment that we live in here in America too.
You're talking about the approach of
Socratic method.
Socratic method of Socrates, and the approach of asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, in a conversation with this one particular sibling that I'm talking about, they asked me a really potentially life-altering question. Do you think that I should do this, or should I do that? And I didn't answer the question. I said, let me ask you the question this way. Are you happy when you're in this kind of circumstance with these people? Oh, no, I hate that.
The answer's right there.
And then I was just quiet for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, oh, yeah, I see. So maybe instead of this, maybe you want to consider that, a different alternative. And that may be all someone really needs to think about in order to get off that bubble of uncertainty. Isn't uncertainty really the great cause of anxiety? And isn't anxiety the great cause of needing to speak to a therapist or someone that you're looking for help?
There is a lot of truth to what you just said. It sounds simplistic, but you could draw that in a lot of cases. You know, a lot of cases.
Ergo, when we talked about, my approach to the problems that I have that I'm looking for guidance in, I have anxiety about those issues. Now, if you told anyone that knows me that I had anxiety, I don't think many people would believe you because I don't portray anxious kinds of circumstances
Right.
to people. As a matter of fact, I'm probably the opposite. I'm probably overconfident. I'm probably more confident in my ability to handle whatever's thrown my way than I should be because I often fall short. But I guess what I'm saying is that if you don't have those anxious moments, or when you do, maybe the better way to say it is when you do have those anxious moments, if you know that you can turn to your God in prayer, in that relationship that you have with your God, and that trust, more importantly, the trust that you have that whatever is making you anxious, that that unseen being that is all powerful and all knowing and loves you is willing to make the changes necessary to remove the anxiety from your circumstances. And I think I think that's where I am. And it's a shame. I'm not trying to tell somebody they have to be religious or they have to find their God. I'm not saying that. They can do whatever they want to do. I personally believe that finding your God is the most important thing. I personally believe that no human being is capable of true happiness without having a personal, individual relationship with God. Other people may have other opinions on that, but they talk about in Genesis, made in the image and likeness of God, and I don't know. I don't. There was a time in my life where I was mad at God, and I didn't want anything to do with God or family members because of the tragedy you spoke about. And what I've come to learn is that there cannot be happiness without that relationship with God, and that once you have that relationship, the rest of it all just becomes stuff, you know. And that's how I get through it. I don't know, Mike. Maybe I'm a Neanderthal, like I said.
No, it's not. It's not a Neanderthal. I mean, I can tell those your life tragedies still affect you today when you and I are alone.
Mm.
You know, we'll talk about those things sometimes. And I don't know that having gone to a therapist, like in my case, that I didn't feel like I had to carry the burden as long. I mean, the
Mhm.
burden's always there. Um, or the tragedy is always there. And there are other things that came later in both your and my life that were, I mean, we've been hit with double tragedies.
Yeah.
So you triple. So we don't know what we'd be like without seeing a therapist. I know what you say about that person first has to get to know you, and most of the time, I think I only went to six sessions or something, but the first session or two, that therapist just really trying to get to know you. And if you don't have a good friend, if you don't have somebody that you can reach out to, if you don't have God in your life, then I would say definitely seek out a counselor. Um, you can try and handle it on your own. I mean, maybe you're better off that way. And like Max said, everybody's got a different personality. I like to think I'm a tough guy too. I was special operations for 23 years. Found myself in a lot of hairy situations. And people gravitated towards me. I told you the one thing, people would hang around with me and they said, "Why are you hanging around with me?" Well, you're number one with God, man. Nothing's going to happen to you. I said, "You ever read about the early church and how they fed them to lions and things like that?" And I said, "The Christians are often the first to be sacrificed and
Yeah.
go." The guy backed off, but it's a good feeling when people can trust you, when they can be confident to share their thoughts, their deep thoughts with you. So for those of you out there that might be listening that have that kind of personality, see, some people are natural born therapists. The Bible puts it this way. It basically puts us into modes of gifts. Everybody's got a different gift. Some guys can build things, they can work all day long, they never get tired. You know what your gift is from God because you can do it all day long and hardly get tired. Where wear somebody else out in about
Yeah.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you're the kind of person that God's given you the gift, whether you're a Christian or not, I still believe you've been given a gift. God gives gifts to everyone, whether they love Him or not. He shines grace on everyone. And you can be an empathetic listener and not be a Christian. So if you have that skill, just be ready to listen to people. And if you need help, try and find somebody that's like that.
When people ask me about some of the things that I've endured in my lifetime, I try to explain it this way. The terrible tragedies that have occurred in my life, and they were terrible, they're not okay. They're still not okay today. And I live with them every day. The difference being is that my belief in my God, my belief in my Creator is so strong that even though I don't understand why these things happened, I accept that that was God's plan for me, and that even in my not understanding, even in my unwillingness to accept it as being okay right now, this moment, I know that there was a reason. It's a reason that I can't comprehend. I don't know, but I'm a man and not God. And there's a certain solace in knowing that whatever it is, there is an answer. And maybe someday you will know what that answer is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not okay. It'll never be okay. But it'll never be okay in this life. But there's a life after this one, and maybe it's okay there.
Yeah, what did Paul say? God tells him, "My grace is sufficient." And that's the conclusion. I would say, if anybody's wondering about my counseling session, that's basically the place that I arrived at with my Christian counselor. And I'm a little bit of an extremist in a particular point of view in my Christian faith, and I'm Calvinistic in the sense that I believe in God's absolute predestination. So you might ask, well, even Job, called out to God, why? Why did I have to go through this? And, I would say even if you believe in absolute predestination, you still live you can't live like that. You have to live like the consequences of what happened are still on you.
We don't want to have the conversation.
We don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I know there's a good percentage of Christians out there, because the Bible teaches it, believe that, and we don't understand it. And I always say I don't understand it. I believe it, but that is the point, that whether you believe that, we all come to the same conclusion, in that God has a purpose or a reason. Whether you believe in free will or predestination, He has a reason and the ultimate end. And like you said, we may not know it in this life. And if it's important, I imagine, to have a peaceful life in the afterlife, we'll know then. A preacher once said, life is kind of like, if you ever saw a rug from the Orient,
Mm-hmm.
and on one side it's a beautiful Oriental rug, but on the other side it's all these knots that have been tied to make this beautiful pattern. So on this side we see the shamble of knots, and he said when we get to heaven we'll see the beautiful pattern. And so maybe that's what it is. But if you're struggling out there, like, I forget how many veterans, since we're both veterans, per day, I think it's still 21 or 22 veterans per day committing suicide. If you are to the point where you feel like you're ready to do that, man, it is definitely time to reach out.
Yeah. We have a nationwide, hotline number to contact too. If you're thinking, isn't it 811 now? I don't remember. I don't know what
it's on. I have it. It's a VA website, but
the point is that, we were meant for happiness, and sometimes it's hard to see the happiness with the things that go on in our lives. And as I said to Mike, I can't envision a set of circumstances that would lead me to visit a therapist. But for other people with other lives and other talents and abilities, maybe they do need it. And I'm not going to go to a therapist because I think it's going to make me more attractive to women. Because let me tell you what, it's been a while since I needed to have a woman be attracted to me. And maybe that's, again, a sign of my Neanderthalism. I don't know. Mike, you think we beat this up enough?
Yeah, I think we did.
Well, I guess we ought to get to this is the Mac and Mike.
Out.
Out.